Good morning and welcome to this month's webinar, which is all about managing the menopause in the workplace. So before we start, we would like to introduce ourselves. And for those of you who have not joined any of our previous webinars, I'm Victoria Templeton, one of the HR Knowledge Managers here at HR Solutions. And I'm joined today by Sue Watson, our Head of Client Services, who will be supporting in all our polls and our questions and answers session at the end. We are also supported this morning by Rebecca, who shall be in the background to help support and deal with any technical issues should we encounter any. And because we have so many of you this morning who have joined us today, we've placed you all on mute. However, we do want to hear your questions. So we will be taking questions at the end, so please do let us know of any that you have, noting them in the question box that is available to you. And here is a quick guide just to show you how you do that. So you'll have a GoToWebinar panel on your screen that should look something like this. And please type your question in the questions pane and we'll aim to read out and answer as many as we can at the end. We also want to make this session as interactive as we would normally do at any physical events. So we will be running several polls throughout the session as well. So when we have a poll, you'll see on your screen this slide, and then the poll will come on and you'll just select the answer that's appropriate for you. Please note though that to be able to participate in the polls, you will need to ensure the screen is not in full screen mode, as for some reason GoToWebinar doesn't process polls working in that mode. So without further ado, let's begin today's webinar. And so in today's webinar, we will begin by first looking to understand the menopause, as that's going to be helpful to know from what our responsibilities are and how we can look to support somebody going through it. And as with all matters relating to our employees at work, there will be legal duties placed on employers, so I shall be taking you through what these are before I then share with you some practical ways in which we can support employees in line with the law. So let us begin with finding out about the menopause and how it can affect somebody in the workplace. So the menopause occurs when there's a change in the balance of the body's sex hormones, and it happens when the body is no longer releasing eggs. Estrogen levels decline, which ultimately results in the menstrual cycle stopping. But it can also occur because of certain medical treatments, such as surgery or cancer treatments like chemotherapy and radiotherapy. And it usually does occur between the ages of 45 and 55, but the average age in the UK is 51 years. However, it can occur early, and they say that 1 in 100 people experience it before the age of 40. There are several medical terms as well that's used to describe the various stages of the menopause. And so one of those is known as the perimenopause, and that's a medical term to describe the time leading up to the menopause. And it is in this period where symptoms are commonly experienced. Now, the perimenopause can take place over several years, and for many people, the symptoms are not always connected to the menopause. It means that the menopause is not a one-off event, but it does take place over several years. You then have the menopause, and that's the medical term used to describe somebody who has not had a period for at least 12 months. And we also have what's known as the premature menopause, and that medical term is given when somebody experiences the menopause before the age of 40. Symptoms can vary for each person, and the extent to which they impact somebody can also vary. And the menopause can also be experienced by those who are transgender, non-binary, as well as intersex. And as you can see from these slides, there are many physical and mental symptoms that arise from the menopause. People experience temperature imbalances, so that's your hot flushes. The imbalance in hormones can affect sleep, whether this is difficult sleeping or waking up because of the night sweats. We also know that the menopause symptoms can also include migraines, difficulty concentration, and brain fog. People can also experience joint problems too. So it's perhaps no surprise that there's also that connection between the menopause symptoms and it having an effect in the workplace. And I'm going to shortly be taking you through some data just highlighting that. And this data comes from various qualified sources, which include medical professionals, menopause experts, and as well as data that's been captured by professional organisations and institutions such as the Department of Work and Pensions, the Women and Equalities Committee that's currently sitting in Parliament, and businesses such as Bupa, as well as the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development. Now, we know from various research, and one survey in particular which surveyed 1,132 individuals, that 90% said their symptoms negatively impacted on them at work. We also know that 51% of those reported having to take time off because of their symptoms, and that a staggering 32% considered leaving their employment because of how the menopause affected them. And actually, we know from another report that's come from Bupa, who partnered with the Chartered Institute of Personnel Development, that there have been 900,000 people who have actually left their employment because of their symptoms having that effect in the workplace. And on top of this, 51% have had to reduce their working hours as a way to better deal with their symptoms. But also, further research shows us that we've seen an increase in the number of employment tribunal claims which are linked to the employee's experience of going through the menopause. So in 2018, researchers found that there were just 5 tribunals. In 2019, this increased to 6. But by 2020, we were seeing 16 in that year. And by the first half of this year alone, we were already at 10 tribunals. And so the menopause can and does impact on the workplace. And in our final statistic here, I just wanted to highlight that 51% of the UK population are women, and that 3.5 million female employees are aged over 50, meaning we have at least 3.5 million workers experiencing the menopause or soon will be. So it makes good business sense for employees to understand how to manage the menopause at work. It's not just about doing the right thing for somebody. We know the physical symptoms such as joint pain, migraines, heavy bleeding can lead to needing to take more frequent breaks or even time off from the workplace. And you know, we see higher absence levels because of it. And with the mental health symptoms, we're likely to see errors in work, people working at a much slower pace in completing their tasks, poorer decision making, or even lower levels of team engagement and team interaction, because we know that there can be anxiety, low mood, and difficulty concentration. So it's really important to be open to understanding your employees' individual experience so that you may understand what support is necessary for them. We must also be mindful that those employees who are either non-binary, transgender, or intersex can experience the menopause or menopausal symptoms. So for transgender people, their gender identity doesn't obviously match the gender they were assigned at birth. So for a transgender man, i.e., they were born female, but they have the female reproductive system, but who identify as male, may still experience the menopause. For transgender women, i.e. their identity at birth was male, but who transitioned to female, they can experience symptoms that are similar to the menopause when they have medical intervention which tries to align their bodies to their chosen identity. And then consideration should also be given when somebody who refers to themselves as non-binary, as they're either won't have identified to either gender, or they identify with only some aspects of a gender. And it may also be that their identity is fluid and therefore involves them being both male and female. And there are also some people who are born intersex, where they are born with reproductive or sexual anatomy that doesn't fit with either male or female bodies, and therefore could undergo the menopause. And so transgender, non-binary and intersex and the menopause is a very complex area, and so that individual will be seeking the relevant medical support and treatment from their own medical professional, but it's really important that as employers, we recognise that the menopause can affect everybody in the workplace. And so, given the statistic that 51% of the UK population are women and that 3.5 million females are employed over the age of 50, we're going to run our first poll, which is about our experiences in either having managed it or currently managing it with an employee or in the workplace with somebody that may be going through it. So, Sue, if I could kindly ask you to load the first poll.
Yep, that's there. Okay.
Thank you.
Just let that run a little bit. Nearly everybody's voted now.
Okay.
Okay, I'll just a few more coming in.
Yeah.
Okay, let's close that poll and share the results with everyone.
And what do we have?
So 54% yes and 46% no.
Oh,
so
okay.
just
Right.
over half of us though. So still a significant amount of people, isn't it?
It is. It is. And I think, interestingly, if we think back to the previous slides and the symptoms, and actually this perimenopause phase, I wonder how many people at work are experiencing symptoms but in isolation and they're not connecting it to the menopause, because obviously we know it can start several years before actually the point where the period stopped for that 12-month period. So it's interesting. There could be people in the workplace that perhaps may be demonstrating some symptoms but not quite recognizing it's connected.
Absolutely. Right, I'll hide that one now.
Yeah.
And are we running the second one?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay, I'll load that one up for you.
And this is about whether you have a menopause policy in the workplace at the moment.
This one's a little bit more divided.
Yeah.
Okay, let's close that poll and share the results.
Okay. So 85% don't and 15% do. Okay, so that's it's probably not surprising actually, because I think the menopause is still very much a taboo subject. I know we've had menopause awareness month in October, so there's been a lot, on social media and in the news about it. But I suppose it doesn't come as a surprise to me that.
I think it's something we've been started to be asked a lot about as the profile's been raised socially and generally in the news. So I think watch this space.
And I'll come on to talk a little bit more about a policy later. So thank you, Sue.
Back over to you.
Thank you. So we're now going to look at an employee's legal duty, and as employees we do have a legal responsibility to look after the health and well-being of our employees. So specifically to the menopause, it's about ensuring the workplace conditions and working practices do not make those menopausal symptoms worse. But also, if we're not managing it appropriately, it can lead to legal claims, and this is what we're going to come on to look at next in this section. And we do have another quick poll, so if I could kindly ask you again to launch this next one, and it's about the claims that potentially could exist. And so it's a question to you: what claims do you think employers could face if the menopause is not appropriately managed? And you can select as many as you think.
Okay, I've launched that one for you.
Thank you.
couple more minutes.
Yeah.
They're nearly all in now. Okay, I'll close that one and share the results with you.
Okay, lovely.
There we go. So.
Okay. Yeah, very interesting.
Quite a
Yeah, and
high statistic for all of them. So yeah.
yeah, and I'll come on to talk about this next in this section. So thank you for that, Sue.
Okay, back over to you.
Thank you. So, following on from that, I'm just going to talk about the Equality Act of 2010, because this is the piece of legislation, as you know, that protects employees from being discriminated against in the workplace. And it actually can be relevant to somebody going through the menopause. So obviously following that poll, you all correct to indicate where those claims could lie. So first of all, it could be on the grounds of age, and this is because the menopause is generally age-related. You do have a disability, and I know that was our lowest score on that poll just there. I think it was about 51%, but actually somebody's symptoms can be so severe and debilitating that it can actually qualify as a disability for the purpose of the Equality Act. So it's not an automatic disability. It very much depends on the circumstances and the symptoms that that individual is suffering. There obviously can be claims arising on the grounds of sex. So if a female employee is treated less favourably to a male colleague and they believe that it was because of them going through the menopause. And finally, claims in regards to gender reassignment. So as I mentioned a moment ago, somebody who has transgender, non-binary or intersex can experience menopausal symptoms. You then have, from a dismissal point of view, challenges from an unfair dismissal. So if somebody is dismissed for performance capability reasons and they're saying that their menopausal symptoms were contributing factor, you know, I talked about earlier around concentration issues, having brain fog, perhaps more procrastination, making wrong decisions and not sort of clearly thinking, perhaps, you know, because of the effects of going through the menopause, then that can all lead to how somebody is performing at work. So if that's not managed appropriately and in line with the procedures and fairly, then that's where there could be a claim. And a further claim could be in regard to a dismissal that's for poor attendance because of somebody's absence levels, and they believe their absence levels and therefore their dismissal is arising out of the menopause. So there are claims that that can exist, so it's important for employees to be mindful of that. And also, just to finish, from a health and safety point of view, employees have the right not to be dismissed if they complain about or refuse to work in what they believe are unsafe working conditions. You know, so if an employee raised concerns around the workplace and failures in managing their menopausal symptoms, or you know the workplace is actually making their symptoms worse, then if they were to be dismissed for taking action by not either attending work or what have you, then it could potentially render that dismissal unfair for those health and safety grounds. And dismissals on health and safety grounds are automatically unfair, meaning you don't need your normal 2 years qualifying service. So that's sort of the context that we need to be mindful of when we're supporting employees going through the menopause. You know, we've got the legal context, but also it's the right thing to do by our employees. So we're going to now look at the practical steps for managing the menopause. And I'm just going to run a quick poll next. And it's just going to really ask you how you currently support the menopause in your workplace. You know, and you can select all that applies. So do you have a menopause policy? Do you currently flex your absence performance procedures? Do you use occupational health? And do you provide line management training, for example? So if you could please have a go at answering this. We'll have to see what the results are.
It's all loaded.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, let's
Yep.
close that poll and share the results.
Okay, so yep, so 19% of you have the menopause policy. It's good to see 40% of you flex your absence and performance procedures, and obviously 32% occupational health. That's really interesting, and I'm going to come on to explain why in a moment. And line management training, and I suppose that doesn't necessarily come as a surprise either for me. And I guess it doesn't have to be just a standalone menopause training course or briefing. You know, it could be part of your absence management training that you run if you do roll out your absence management training, or it could be part of any health and safety training that you offer. But certainly we'd recommend some form of training for your workforce, your managers, so that we can help those employees.
Absolutely, and I think one of the other issues that's key is that the employee themselves might not feel comfortable talking about it. So it's how do you actually encourage your managers, which they should be anyway, to be approachable but understanding. And they may have to start the conversation, which could be difficult, but to try and show that they are supportive.
Yeah.
So it's the way they approach it as well. So the training isn't just in an awareness, it's actually in how you can physically support and encourage your staff to share concerns with them that might be related to things like this.
Yeah, it's the soft skills, isn't it? It's the ability to be able to have conversations about what's a very sensitive subject, isn't it? And you know, but also it's about breaking down the taboo, because there is very much a taboo subject. Thank you, Sue.
Okay, over to you.
Thank you. So we're going to now look at the practical steps to supporting the menopause at work. And you know, we've talked about the policy, and having a standalone menopause policy can act as a guide for line managers as well as employees, you know, because it lets them know what support is available and how it can be accessed, but also from a line manager point of view, what things they should be considering when supporting somebody through it. You know, so it also very much demonstrates to employees that it isn't a taboo subject in our workplace. You know, and by having that policy in place, it can also help to minimise the risk of claims, you know, and as we've talked about, whether that's age, sex, disability, discrimination. So having that standalone policy is essential, I would say, to supporting employees, especially, you know, given the statistics, we know that, you know, 51% of the UK population are female and 3.5 million are in the age category in the workplace. So having a standalone menopause policy is important, but also acknowledge it within existing policies. So, you know, for example, your health and safety policy, your dress code policy, and your flexible working. So look at existing workplace policies that you have and make sure that they remain fit for purpose and support those going through the menopause. So I guess a really good example is, you know, your dress code policy. So perhaps do you need to update it to reflect the fact that you need to be mindful that there may be people with medical conditions, which can include the menopause, that therefore means that some adjustments or accommodation of some adjustments for them in the workplace, you know, especially if uniforms are a requirement, and how can you support somebody through having the right dress code policy that makes them feel that they actually can manage their symptoms appropriately. We also think that the health and safety and risk assessment piece is vital, so for managing it, because it's a legal requirement for an employer to consider the health and safety needs of menopausal employees, that there's a legal requirement to identify risks to ensure that they're either reduced or removed, because essentially your obligation is to make sure that those menopausal symptoms do not worsen through the course of their work. So Common kind of issues that you likely need to address in your risk assessment and your health and safety processes are things like your temperature control, ventilation, your toilet facilities, uniform and working arrangements. So just make sure that your risk assessment includes workers of this demographic to make sure that your workplace isn't making somebody's symptoms worse. And then the line management training, which we've just touched on, you know, the role of the line manager is key when managing the menopause. You know, they play a vital role in helping to ensure performance is maintained, absence is minimised, and therefore symptoms are managed safely and effectively. But also the individual is treated with dignity and respect. You know, line managers should be aware that it is an issue that can affect a particular age group. So it's vital to ensure line managers are aware and can fulfill their responsibilities towards employees who are going through the menopause. And when we think about flexibility, there is a need to actually adapt to the needs of the individual that's going through the menopause, because they're all going to have, everybody's going to have very different health and welfare needs. So examining the person's working arrangements is one way in which you could adapt to the workplace to support an employee's health needs. Or it may be that you provide more frequent breaks, or where there's sudden periods of feeling unwell, you support them taking those short periods of time away from the desk or their office, so that you're letting them, I guess, manage it as best they can. Or you may be able to accommodate a reduction in working hours. You know, it's just being mindful of the need to be flexible, you know, and any adaptation should always be discussed and mutually agreed with the employee on the provision that they should be in place so that they can benefit them rather than disadvantaging them. And having multiple channels of support is also necessary. So we know that the menopause is still a taboo subject. Some individuals may be uncomfortable talking to their line managers about it. It is sensitive. And so to have a variety of ways in which people can get support is important. So apart from the line manager, channels of support could come from your HR department, an employee assistance program if you offer one, or occupational health. Official literature could also be forms of support, so directing them to the NHS or charities such as the British Menopause Society, and there's also the Women's Health Concern. So it's just making sure your employees know where to access that help and support, and if you are implementing a policy or already have one, just make sure those channels of support are within that policy, so you're directing the readers to it. And then having transparent and positive messaging in order to normalise the subject is important. It is a significant health issue that affects the workplace, so having those open and honest conversations will help normalise the subject. So talking about it in company policies, having your standalone policy as I've talked about, as well as acknowledging it within your usual processes. These all help to break down that taboo, as well as ensuring that it's supported at work and taken seriously, especially when needing to deal with somebody's performance or attendance at work. And in terms of performance and attendance, then having clear and supportive sickness and performance procedures are important. So making sure that they're suitably written, that they can support employees going through the menopause, bearing in mind that for some the symptoms can be debilitating and therefore it could be a disability. So under the Equality Act, so just as you would support other mental and physical conditions, the menopause should be treated with the same seriousness and regard as well. So and of course, if it is to be a disability, then there's that legal obligation to make those reasonable adjustments. And equally, ensure your performance procedures are flexible and supportive enough to be able to deal with the health issues, because actually any serious health issue impacting performance should be considered and taken account of in any situation when you're needing to manage that. And this leads me to my final bullet point in regards to a tribunal case, and it's Merchant versus British Telecommunications. Now it goes back a few years, but it's still relevant because in this case the Employment Tribunal held that direct sex discrimination had taken place. the employer had failed to treat the employee's menopause in the same way as other medical conditions when managing the employee's performance. Now, the line manager had discriminated against his employee when he dismissed her for poor performance, despite medical evidence indicating that there were health issues relating to the menopause. And this is why I said a moment ago around the occupational health. It's really important. And in this case, there had been some occupational health evidence that reported that they were experiencing symptoms of the menopause and that they were contributing to how they were performing at work. Now, the tribunal concluded that the line manager had chosen to disregard the medical evidence, and therefore they deemed that to be a failure in that they failed to deal with her symptoms in the same way as other medical conditions as part of a corrective performance capability process. They also found that the line manager had used his own experience from when his wife went through the menopause instead of using the medical evidence relevant to the employee. And this sort of emphasises the point that I made earlier around everybody's situation is going to be different. The extent to which people suffer from the symptoms will vary. It's not a blanket approach. You've really got to understand the health and welfare needs of that individual that you're supporting. And therefore you can't make assumptions. So just because you've known somebody else that had certain symptoms and was able to manage it in a certain way, it doesn't mean to say that will apply in a different case. So, and the line manager was criticised for using their personal experience in that situation. And so we know from this ruling that a tribunal would expect any reasonable employer to seek medical evidence in helping to understand the nature of their symptoms and how those symptoms affected the individual, particularly when applying formal procedures. So that case is Merchant versus British Telecommunications. You will get a copy of the slides afterwards, so there'll be a link to the judgment if anybody would like to have a look. And so this now brings us to the end of our webinar, where we'll focus on questions and answers. See if we've had any come up through the session today, Sue. So over to you if we have.
Yes, we've had an interesting one which picks up nicely from the case you've just been talking about.
Okay.
So this is from a domiciliary care company who provide care to vulnerable people in their own homes. And they're saying they're finding it difficult to risk assess due to the variety of tasks and the duty of care to customers. And I think the key thing here is what you're saying is you cannot have a blanket risk assessment that would apply to that particular role, because every person going through this process will experience different symptoms at a different level. So therefore, I would suggest if an individual is having challenges in their role, that you discuss with them what challenges they're facing, consider whether the menopause symptoms might be a factor in their challenges, and therefore risk assess what part of their role that affects. So for example, if they're having the foggy brain and they're really struggling to concentrate or to think clearly, then if they're required as part of their role to administer medication to one of their customers, then could that be a risk? And so therefore you need to talk to them, to what extent are you having the fogginess? How clear are you thinking? Do you feel that you're still capable of doing that, and maybe have to work around it? So it's really, really specific, I think, isn't it, to the role and to the individual in that role. And you would probably risk assess it at the time the challenges were being presented, because you've already risk assessed the role generally for safety. It's just, this is an added element to factor in. Or you say generally you need to make sure that everybody's aware that if they are struggling in some tasks that they normally wouldn't be, they must address it with a line manager so that you can make sure they're kept safe. They're kept safe as well as the customer.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting, isn't it? And because not only are symptoms going to vary, but also the roles that people do. Some people might be in regulated roles where they're governed by certain rules and work requirements, like, you know, within the care sector, and or others might not be necessarily regulated roles, and the scope in which you can make adaptations will also vary. So it is an interesting, and it is very much a person by person case, and it can only be supported through open dialogue and conversation with that
absolutely.
person, with the help of medical advice as necessary.
Thank you. I think that's it, absolutely. And talk to somebody. You know, we're talking it through with people. You know, through our helpline, through the support we offer, in order to just try and help them reach some kind of progress on it. That's the problem. Is it can if it's left not dealt with at the time, then it's when something happens that often it comes to a head, and then it's much more difficult to handle, rather than if it's planned for and considered carefully as these things start to raise their head. Okay, we had another question. Somebody's been looking for a policy but can't find one, which I think is an easy one to answer. If you head over to our doc shop, we do have one available. It's in true Blue Peter fashion, one we made earlier. So there is a menopause policy, and if anybody's interested in that, then just contact us afterwards. But I say, if you go to our website and our doc shop, you will find one there that you can download. For a very small cost.
And for anybody that is already has a membership to our knowledge base, there's also further guidance available that's to help
as well
on
as
this.
the policy.
So, as well as the policy. So
and if you are a client, then just ask your consultant. And they will give you one. We've got another question just come in. What would you recommend if a member of staff is absent for long periods of time due to menopausal symptoms, but we cannot recruit to their role to cover their workload? Difficult to balance their needs and those of the business. That is challenging, I guess, like any long-term mental health and absence issues,
I was just
isn't
about
it?
to say that. It's so, even though we're obviously focusing this webinar specifically on the menopause, in the big scheme of things, you would manage your absence policy just like you would with any medical condition. So, and if you're dealing then with long periods of absence, you know, you've got to work with your existing absence policy. And as with any absence, long term, there's always a point, isn't there, at which, you know, can an employer reasonably continue to keep that job open, you know, and it's about understanding if there's likely to be a return to work in the foreseeable future, which is easier said than done, isn't it, Sue? But so, you know, at the end of the day, we want to try and support everybody regardless of medical conditions, but there will become a point where I guess, can you continue to keep that job open? What
Can you
you know,
sustain it?
it's a hard, precise question to answer, because, you know, how long are we talking about when, you know, we're talking, I suppose, long periods, but and it's all going to be based on your organisation and what's reasonable to you.
And what if anything you can provide. I guess if you seek occupational health support in understanding if there's anything you can do to support them, to enable them to return, even if it's for part of the role rather than all of the role, or if you can cover certain aspects of the role, but if you don't have that support, it's just like with any long-term absence issue, then, you know, you might find it difficult if they make a claim, because you've not sort of researched all the possible options of trying to make it work before you make the decision that you can no longer sustain it. So it is difficult, but other than temporary cover, it's difficult to actually replace them until you're absolutely sure they can never return, or not in the near future. And whether near future is reasonable in your circumstances would depend very much on the organisation, the setup, the number of people you employ, the number of people in that role, how easy it is to cover, how skilled they are. Everything kind of plays a factor in those decisions, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. That's a good question.
Absolutely, they're all good questions. Yeah. So I think that's all the questions we have now. Yeah.
Okay. Lovely. So let's move on then. Thank you, Sue, for that. So we do have the final poll here, and as always, towards the end, we do like to see if there's anything that we can perhaps do to help you in your business after the webinar. And it's just really just to ask you if you would like us to contact you afterwards, then are there any particular areas you'd like to find out more about? And you can select more than one, and it's really just if you'd like us to get in contact to let you know more about our HR services, HR training that we operate, the HR knowledge base, which I mentioned a moment ago. And then obviously we do also support health and safety, so any of our services and training in regard to that, as well as payroll. So do let us know, and then we'll be happy to follow up afterwards with you on that.
Okay, I think that's just a few more coming through
Okay.
now. Okay, I'll close that now.
Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, and I'm just going to then just bring the webinar to a close. So before we go, we'd just like to let you know about some things that are coming up. So we do offer the ILM Level 5 Award in Leadership and Management, which is online, and it's a qualification designed for project managers, department heads and other middle managers. And so it's ideal for anybody wanting to develop their skills and experience and improve performance and prepare for senior management responsibilities. So we have this running from January all the way through to April. So do let us know if you're interested in joining this programme. And then we also do also offer the ILM Level 3 Award in Leadership Management. Again, it will be operated online. Dates for the next programme will be released very soon, but still please do get in touch if you would like to attend the Level 3 course. And this one is for those who have management responsibilities but no formal training. So it's really ideal for your team leader level who'll be leading people through organisational change, budget cuts or other pressures that, that we perhaps may see. We also run HR management and development training, and we've got a couple of courses coming up, again online. So we have the equality, inclusion and diversity, which is in just a couple of weeks on the 25th. And then we also are running the disciplinary and grievance. And just to let you know that we are accredited to operate these at CPD. So you will get the relevant points for that towards your CPD. And of course, we operate health and safety training courses. These are in person because of obviously the practical nature of them, but obviously in a COVID secure way. We have a level 2 mental health first aid course on the 23rd of November, fire safety on the 7th of December, and then we've also got emergency first aid at work and level 2 food safety. So if any of these are of interest to you, then please do get in touch. And we do have our next webinar on the 9th of December, which is about how recruitment has changed, obviously, since the pandemic. And we will have some guest speakers join us on that one. So we'll be announcing more details of that soon. But that's going to be on the 9th of December, 10 o'clock till 11. And then we are currently in the process of just finalising our new schedule for 2022. So please do keep an eye out, and we hope to see you on our future webinars. If you would like to stay in the loop with us and be amongst the first to be invited to our webinars, but also receive the latest news, then you can sign up to our newsletter. There's a link here. It'll be great to have you in receipt of our newsletters. And then really, if you do have any further questions, please do get in touch. Our contact number's here. And we also have our email address, or you can contact us via our main website. And so that concludes our webinar today. But before we go, After the webinar, we shall be sending a short survey to capture your feedback, and it really would be appreciated if you could just take a few moments to complete the survey, because it really helps us to improve our webinars and helps us focus on new subjects moving forward. So if you can, that'd be really great. And then this is just a thank you for attending. That we've had a great number of you join us today, and thank you to Sue for supporting in the polls and the questions. Always interesting having those discussions, and thank you for Rebecca to help in the background with any technical questions that may have come through. So thank you all, and I hope you have a good day, and look forward to seeing you on the next webinar. Thank you.